My analogy that I always give for startups or things that are just starting, it's like 5-year-old swarm ball soccer, right? Like
That's a good one. Yeah, I like it.
everyone's just trying to they're just all doing this. Everyone's figuring it out, right? And I think that's you can see as you go from 5-year-old soccer to high school, and the stages of what you kind of know. People understand positions, they understand spacing, passing, just understanding the game and the strategy of the game. So that's where I always kind of view that, and reminding people of, when we're in a certain phase, it's like, it's okay. Like we're in swarm ball soccer here.
Welcome to the Bold Play podcast. I'm Ryan Prindiville, and this is where we pull back the curtain on leaders who have truly made bold plays in business, transformations, reinventions, and the decisions that define careers. This podcast isn't just storytelling, it's a playbook for action. Today, I'm joined by somebody who embodies bold leadership, Jean Freeman, principal and CEO of Zambezi, one of the largest female-owned full-service creative agencies in the country. Over the past decade, Jean has grown Zambezi into an award-winning powerhouse, serving global brands like Apple, Google, Nike, and some entrepreneurial brands as well, I know, while also championing women in leadership across the advertising space. Jean, welcome to the Bold Play.
Thanks, great to be here.
Hey, Jean, before we dive into your background a little bit, you've been leading one of the top independent agencies during some of the fastest shifts, some might say craziest shifts in the marketing and media industry, that the post-COVID industry changes, the rise of AI, changing consumer expectations, maybe even government involvement and so forth in certain cases. How are you viewing the current business environment that you're living in?
Great question. And a lot of it sometimes is day by day
Yeah.
from that aspect. But, I think the thing about marketing specifically in the last 20 years is, like, we have to have the expectation that things are going to change and evolve. That is only exacerbated since coming out of COVID, and now with coming into AI realities and what a AI fueled future looks like for marketing communications. But I think a great embodiment also is like our name Zambezi. So our name comes from the Zambezi shark, which is one of the most adaptable animals on the planet, going from freshwater into saltwater. And so I really that's how we operate at Zambezi. We operate in that adaptability type of mindset and expecting things that are going to change. The things that are working for us right now are probably not, it's not going to be the same playbook 2 or 3 years out. So that approach, I think, is really key in marketing, because specifically on the media side, content creation side, we are in a ever-changing world, which I think, again, coming back to that mindset reality, if you have the right type of mindset, it's a great opportunity for independent companies to come in and make their mark.
It's interesting you say that. I think there's some threads that we have seen through some of the prior conversations on this podcast about the pace of change being faster than ever. I'm curious if you think that, based on something you just said, has the pace of change in your industry specifically, is it fundamentally different than it was even 3 or 5 years ago?
Yes, I mean, the pace is definitely accelerating, but I do feel we are, specifically with an AI, and you're already starting to see it. I mean, we're recording this, the week before Thanksgiving, and who knows, from an AI, the AI bubble conversation is starting to, you're starting to see that more frequently. And so I think, like any new technology, there's a race to understand it. And
Right.
then once kind of people reach that same, I would say, same sort of parity of understanding, then it becomes, okay, how do we actually apply this to our business in a way that actually makes sense and helps propel us forward, not just in, well, since they're doing it, we're doing it kind of aspect. But you have to be curious in order to discover what you don't know. But the pace of change is, I've been in this business now 20 years. And so from when we started to where we are now, I just think this is a new way of operating. So I think, what we tell everybody is like, all right, let's just put on our big girl pants and just kind of get ready for the continued change that we're going to have to, get used to.
That's a perfect segue. You said you've been in the business for 20 years, uh, and you've done a lot of things and kind of evolved throughout multiple stages. Maybe we can go back to some of your early career time, whether it's Fallon or Saatchi or Nike or Intel, and maybe talk a little bit about some of those early lessons that kind of shaped, maybe who you became later on.
Mhm. Yes, I mean, I was exposed to advertising, I would say, early in high school. My father was on the corporate marketing side and took me to a focus group when I was in high school, and just found it fascinating that this was actually a job that you could figure out consumers' wants and needs through that from consumer research. Um, and so from there, I was just intrigued by ad agencies and how they operated. When I was in college, I had internships at professional sports teams that also always had outside agencies. And I really loved working with the agencies. They just
Mm.
have a figure it out, can do attitude
Yep.
that I really gravitated towards. So when I finished college, I was actually slated to go into the Peace Corps. That was my plan post college. And then where I was supposed to go, my assignment got pushed back. I started to get a little, nervous. You're 22. I was bartending. I got to bartend for 6 more months. So I just started looking and applying for jobs at advertising agencies in Minneapolis. And I was lucky enough to get an assistant account executive at Fallon, which at the time was at the apex of the advertising industry in
Right.
2000. Um, and really put Minneapolis on a map from being a city that really nurtures creative companies, and also just took the attention of the advertising industry. So that was fabulous for me. Like, just for a first job out of school to be at a place like Fallon, it has really it made such an imprint on me. I think with how I run Zambezi now, and how you want Zambezi to be, a place where it's a creative first company, familial as well, and also hard on the work, but not on each other from that aspect. I'm
Some
very,
of
I'm
the
very
from
thankful for
some
my
of the
time at
Department
Fallon.
of best laid plans, right? Like sometimes the things that you think you need are not necessarily the things that truly end up benefiting you in the long run, right?
Yeah.
Like, Peace Corps doesn't happen,
Um,
so you make the pivot and
Peace
move
Corps
on
doesn't
move on
happen.
to something that intrigues you.
Right. And then I spent a few years on the agency side thinking, okay, well, I really now want to go on the client side. So went and got my fancy grad degree, and then was ready to, embark on the brand side. And so ended up at Nike for a few years after that. And, I was a college athlete. And so Nike for me was the perfect job. It was the
Totally.
perfect articulation of all the things that I loved. And it was interesting for me being at Nike, because I think that was a realization that this actually wasn't the right fit for me. And again, when I talk with a lot of people that are going through their careers too, sometimes it's almost important to find out what you don't want to do and what you
Yeah.
don't like. It's almost as important as what you do. But I just think that really cemented for me, as opposed to a large global, corporation. I'm more of a small business type of person. And I love, I just really love fixing problems quickly. And also with that agency speed and mentality, was lucky enough to have the opportunity to start Zambezi in 2006. And that, from there, Zambezi is going on its 20th anniversary next year. So we've been in business for 20 years, and
Congratulations. That's a
that's an,
huge milestone.
thank you. But even in of that self, but I work with my husband, and we met at Fallon, and still married, also 20 years. But he was
Congratulations
at
again.
Wyden. Thank you. Chris was at Wyden. I was at Nike, and Chris managed Nike basketball. And so was shooting at the time. They had just signed LeBron James as a Nike athlete. So bringing LeBron into the Nike family, as well as
Yeah,
Kobe Bryant. And
big
so
time.
Kobe, as Chris and Kobe developed a relationship, Kobe was very interested in his brand and advertising, and approached Chris and wanted to start an agency and wanted to be in LA. And so we were 27 at the time, and got the opportunity to move to LA to start Zambezi.
There's a number of things you just said that I think are interesting. One, it's great to be in the right place at the right time. I mean, that doesn't hurt, but it also doesn't hurt to learn from. I like what you said, and you kind of said it quickly, but you said sometimes it's good to learn what you don't want to do. And I talk to interns or starting people starting their career a lot as well, and I think that's really important for people to understand, is that learning what you're spending time to learn from what you don't want to do sometimes creates opportunities for what you're going to be great at later on. And so I like that
Definitely.
takeaway. You said that. Well, let's jump in. So now Chris, who's not your husband at the time, and I think, right, and you guys are just
We had just gotten married, so we were married just not even a year before Zambezi was started.
yeah. So that's a wild
Mhm.
balance of business and personal. So you've never
It
not
is.
balanced the business and personal life all intermingled together. As you're working with big personalities and global names and so forth as well, how was that balance early in your career?
I think also the thing about entrepreneurship is, to your point, you don't know what you don't know until you start.
Right.
And I think there is like a beautiful naivete about that, about, embarking on a business operation where what your business plan is, your, very glossy, sophisticated business plan. Quickly, once you kind of get into it, some of the things have to move and pivot pretty quickly. And so I think that's a lesson for all entrepreneurs. And then I think that through that, it's like a muscle of getting used to the fact of like rewriting a plan, seeing what sticks, going towards that, pivoting towards that. But that's really part of it, is like, whether you're whether you're 25 starting a company or you're 55 starting a company, it entrepreneurship has its own realities. And I've definitely grown over the last 20 years with helping build this business. But that mindset at the beginning of expecting change, I think, is pivotal for sure.
So so now you're married and you have this company, you're running it together, and you have big names. You're starting out with Kobe, the one of the biggest names in basketball there is out there, and it's probably great except for when it's not. Is my suspicion.
Oh, totally. Yeah. I mean, the interesting thing, and we're so blessed that we had the opportunity to work very closely with Kobe.
Right.
We're the same age as Kobe. And so really from that standpoint of seeing that Mamba mentality before it actually was like verbalized to the world. There's no one that works harder. There's no one that studies more. There's no one that challenges to get true excellence. So that was a great training ground for us as well, as in our early years of learning how to run a business, how to run a business efficiently and effectively. As you know, like most startups fail by the third year because of lack of cash,
Yep.
and we had to learn very early to manage cash. And that's one of the tenets that I always talk about with business owners that are starting out. But yeah, you know, it sounds great and it sounds sexy from that aspect. But of course, like any sort of business, at the end of the day, you have to perform.
Right.
And the thing that was interesting about when we started ZMBZ is we're coming from Wieden and Kennedy and Nike. We had exceptional sports expertise. Kobe did not want to be front facing in the business. He did not want it to be known as Kobe's agency. He really just wanted it to use for his own personal projects. And then helped us make some introductions. But at the end of the day, we realized pretty quickly that it was sink or swim.
You had to run a real business.
We had to run our own business. Um, and so we started in '06. So '08 and '09 were right around the corner. And, ZMBZ barely survived '08 and '09.
Fine.
And that classic thing of like, two payroll runs away from no cash in the bank. And then we won a big pitch with Coca-Cola, which then kind of helped us into the next echelon of Zambezi. But during that time, when your back up against the wall, if you come out of it on the other side, there's usually great learnings and great vision of how you're going to move this business forward.
Right.
And that's when we really doubled down as being experts in sports entertainment. It's almost kind of amazing when we started that we didn't come out and say that and have that be our reason to be. But again, it's that entrepreneurial journey that you learn and going through. So from from like '09 to 14, we grew very quickly. We added really large, sophisticated clients: Coca-Cola, Foot Locker, 2K Sports video games, Heineken. So we quickly went from more regional to national. And then also from a global standpoint, we actually opened an office in Shanghai for a few years, which I was very in the middle of doing that. And I think that was the aspect of the China operations that gave me the confidence that at one day, if I was to either be a business owner, take over Zambezi, I know that I can do this by opening offices in China. That taught me a lot of lessons.
Well, maybe let's talk about that, because you just talked about almost three evolutions in that period of 5 years. What I heard, you talked about an evolution of who your client is, of the relationships maybe within leadership and how that's happening, and then the shape of how you actually ran the business as well,
Uh-huh.
all leading to a point where then you assumed leadership of the agency yourself, um, and confidence in that. So, maybe I'm interested, in talking about a couple of the lessons learned coming out of the China experiment, I guess I'll call it, maybe, and you
Uh-huh.
can tell me I'm wrong, that shaped that leadership decision about why you would take leadership of the firm as well.
Yeah. From '09 to so I took over control of the ownership in 2015. So basically, we kind of refer to, the doubling down on sports and entertainment to the takeover for Gene and Chris in 2015 is almost like Zambezi 1.0,
Right.
where we were trying a lot of different things and then also scaling from a startup to a midsize. Um,
And is
and
it
I
fair
have
to
a
say
I
that you were running the scale and the operations side of the business more? Is that
yes.
is that the role you were really playing at the time?
Yes, I should have said, like, what I you're in advertising. What is it you do?
Yeah.
But, yeah, in my early days, I was an account manager,
Right.
and so managing client relationships and in the scaling of Zambezi was always really more operational
Right.
because when I really became involved more in it, that was when the quick growth was happening and trying to
Right.
figure out how we keep up with the pace of growth. So, yeah,
And Chris
on the
was driving
operations
kind of
side.
strategy and that
Yes,
side of the
so
business, like
Chris
the
so
client engagement side of the business, right?
Chris was CEO until 2015. And
Right.
so he was overseeing all facets, client management, strategy. He was the face and he was also the conduit of the day-to-day business. And I think that was a pivotal aspect too for us in 2015. What the business needed was a shift in our responsibilities too. Um, and so that is the I have a talk that I give to entrepreneurial students, as well as I would just say students that are just just really more interested on the entrepreneurial journey of how you take a company from a startup to a grown up and the different phases that are involved in that and like what that means to grow, um, and the realities of it in just, more simplistic and simple types of ways. But yeah, I mean, and I think that is a great learning that we've all learned with, growing this business over 20 years. We've been at this for a while, and have learned those different ideas of like truly at the end of the day, like what does success mean? And success truthfully can have a lot of different definitions.
So you took Zambezi through that awkward teenager phase of the business, that from the toddler
Yes.
stage into the awkward teenager phase. Is Zambezi an adult business now, or is it still growing?
We're still growing. I mean, I think we've definitely evolved and are more sophisticated from a standpoint. Part of my goal for the company since taking over control of the business in 2015 was really to evolve our services.
Right.
We now have a full media practice as well as a production studio. When we started in our early days, Zambezi 1.0, we were just a creative agency. So we were just the creative ideas and also the production of it. But with our studio services are much more robust. So we can make social content, animation, um, s- lots of varying degrees of different types of video, and then as well as media. And I think as we're seeing AI and social specifically in the last
Hmm.
5 years,
Right.
the media channels are changing rapidly. How you monetize on them is changing monthly. And so having access to be able to, show a brand not only where they should be from a creative messaging standpoint, but the appropriate audience and from a media capacity, I feel is a true value that we add by being able to bring those services together for brands.
So the firm has grown up the types of clients you're serving, the types of services you're offering. I'm hearing the breadth of service and so forth. What about culturally? Does it change as you've scaled and changed? Does the way that you and your team lead, has that changed fundamentally as well?
I would say yes. I think it has to. I mean, at heart, again, who we are as Zambezi as adaptable sharks, like that is
Right.
still our embodiment and has been for 20 years. But there's different ways that you operate when you're a 10-person agency versus when you're a 100-person agency. There just are. And I think that is always the reality of the things that are needed for the business in order to keep it sustainable, and then also things that are needed for the business to continue to make a great place to work so you can have people want to work there. Because as you know, we're both in professional services business. Like at the end of the day,
Totally.
our business is people. And so we have to have environments that are inviting for people to work at, and I think I use COVID as an example kind of coming into this where, we have a flexible we have offices in both LA and Minneapolis. Our headquarters is in LA, but we don't have a set schedule of how many people are in the office and days and things like that. Really, I've let it to department heads and teams to make those calls, so we can keep that. And I do think, valuing flexibility and having that be a core tenet of why it's great to work in Zambezi is something that really resonates with talent right now, as opposed to, I say, 10 years ago. If I was given this proposal to say, Gene, can we have people come into the office whenever they want? I'd say, hells no. Like, I want everyone in the office. So I just think there's also realities of we have to react to market conditions, and then we also have to make decisions of what we think is best for our culture. Um, but yeah, you have to evolve. And I think there's always that idea. We have pretty high tenure, specifically on our senior management and executives teams, which I'm very proud of. People that have been here for a long time and want to continue to have the best years of their career here. Um, but that, retention is our main focus. Like we are committed to keep continuing to retain and keep the best talent.
I'd like to touch on something that I think you kind of touched on a little bit, but I want to circle back. Um, you have a unique situation. You said it in your intro, I think, where you run a run an agency where you work with your husband every day, but then I think you're also still involved in family businesses as well, where you had your dad talking about, giving you leadership lessons early on in life, and I think is
Uh-huh.
your brother still involved in the business as well?
Yep.
Talk to us about family dynamics in business and what works and what doesn't.
Yeah. So just for like a background, my father has always been in more of like consumer products and then paper industry. And so he started a data goods company called Blue Sky in 2005, a year before Zambezi was started in 2006. And that has grown. It's the number one data goods company within mass market retail. So
Dated
Walmart,
goods are things
Target.
like calendars and planners and
Calendars,
those kind of things, right?
planners,
Okay.
yeah, and, talk about from an AI perspective, I mean,
Right.
a lot of people thought when computers really came, are people really gonna use calendars anymore? The answer is yes. There's just the business dynamics of how many companies possibly making them has shifted, but, we still need pen and paper even though we are, so reliant on our internet these days. Anyways, that's a digression, but, so yes, in the early days, when Zambezi was also scaling, I was also helping Blue Sky scale as well. And so if you think about Blue Sky products, the primary target is women. And really what I brought is a unique licensing approach, really using independent women designers to create unique collections for our largest retail partners, being Walmart and Target.
Very fun.
And so from there, the company has really grown. It's $100 million company. My brother now runs it day to day, but I really stepped away on a day to day perspective in 2015 when I took over CEO of Zambezi. That was really just more of the
Can
delineation at
only
that
focus
point.
on
But
so
yeah,
many things at a time, right?
to your larger point of family dynamics, um, I've learned a lot in that in that aspect. And I think where families, businesses can be at their at their strongest is when everyone is really playing the role that they're strongest at. And a lot of times getting to people to understand where their strengths are and where they aren't is truly the hardest part. Because once that self-awareness and acceptance can come in through the benefit of the org, that's when really great leaps can happen from a business perspective. And the thing that really separates that is ego.
Mhm.
Are you going to allow yourself to really understand your limitations and also where you excel, and then trust the rest of the organization to support you in that way? And that's, whether it's, I've found that also, like, yes, you need to do that with families so much because there's so much unsaid emotion and weird things, but just really more effective management teams too. I mean, I apply this also with my team at Zambezi of really from that larger self-awareness perspective of we're all not good at everything, nor should we be. But how can we get the right people in the right positions that need that type of skill in order to accelerate the business? And that really comes through coaching. We spend a lot of time on coaching, and I wish that was something that I had done earlier in my Zambezi tenure. I think a lot of times you're looking at the P&L and figuring out, well, that's a nice to have, not a
Right.
must have. But that's also something I always really advise teams. I mean, if CEOs who really want to scale, that teamwork is so necessary, and coaches can really help you get there quicker.
It's interesting there. You kind of made a bunch of ties there as the coaching comment, I think ties you played sports growing up and in college and so forth. And it's one of those that's a lesson learned that probably a lot of people who play sports know coaches can
Mhm.
really help there. It
Yes.
helps and it can help in business too. And maybe we don't all realize that early on enough in our career. I think that's an interesting one. And you said something about family relationships and trust and knowing your roles. And I've worked with a lot of privately held businesses and family businesses. My father-in-law and I have worked at 3 different companies together over 25 years and had different things. I think that's a really important statement, though, that understanding the role you're playing and understanding the role that may change over time too and evolve.
Mhm.
But I don't think a lot of people have those honest conversations. I don't I really think there's probably a lot more problems in familial relationships and business than success stories, if that makes sense. Do you agree with that?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I just think at the end of the day, that's how we resolve things. We have to have the courage to put things out on the table and resolve. And a lot of times I just feel again, that's where the ego or the emotions and really can play a role, and an intermediary being part of that I think is truly helpful because it's not all reliant on the family to figure it out themselves.
That's
You
smart.
have an external person that can be that player coach to kind of get you to the next phase. But it's a common thing in just general management,
Totally agree.
avoiding conversations that need to happen, and that they actually, the longer you extend this conversation, it's hurtful not only to the person but to the business. And then it's just really, I feel that, and that comes from a culture of knowing that feedback is not viewed as something that's negative. It's viewed as something that's necessary in order for the company to continue to move forward. And there's ways to give it that I think can be coached. But again, I think that is a cultural thing of you feel okay to, have those conversations. We need to have those conversations, and that's the tone is set on an executive standpoint. So if executives aren't doing it, then you can't expect anyone within the org to also do it too.
Address hard things fast and straight on is what I'm hearing you say. And
Yeah.
and and have that fast conversation about it. So maybe let's pivot a little bit. Today, your agency is working with both big Fortune 100 brands, and what I understand is some emerging innovators and different types of companies as well. So, given that, like, how are you guys balancing the rigor required for those big, massive clients and brands versus the agility needed for those high growth companies as well? I assume that's probably a pretty tricky
Mhm.
place to balance with the teams.
It it is, but I feel it's necessary for our
Right.
business. I feel there is the requirement from knowing how to operate at scale that gives you then the validity to be able to help brands elevate to that scale. But you're right, it requires different types of team functions, different types of dynamics. So, and we really work with clients on we have approaches, but the model can change per client.
Right.
So we operate a little bit more like a consultancy as opposed to a one type of service, and this is how we, execute, which I think is important because I think a lot of times where agencies lose the plot is not really understanding the business phase and business realities that our clients are in. So if you're a Fortune 100 client, you have robust internal creative services capabilities.
Totally.
And
You're not
so
replacing those services for the big
what
guys.
and it's really then helping understand of what services do they really need that are not optimal in house that we can help amplify and work with. So we're very used to collaborating with in-house agencies because we have to. Like, that's the reality of how the structure is working. Whereas, emerging companies, they really need a partner. They need multiple services. They don't have the time to manage multiple agencies, so we can really be more of a robust partner for them, providing a lot of services, in that way, which is a different type of model. It's almost helping them understand what's coming around the bend and then, really being an extension of their marketing department in a sense. And that just comes from years of experience of seeing how different types of clients operate and their business structures are. And I think clients, it's not where they appreciate it. I just feel that's agencies. We at times we're not very good at understanding the business of our clients and the
Right.
structure of our clients, and then also getting to the best solution that's going to work for them and get the best output from what
Does
we
does
can
that
do.
mean that agencies have focused more on the creative and the strategy and not on the what's the outcome that the client or the business was trying to achieve and balancing that, how they operate versus the message?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, a lot of times it's like at the end of the day, we're in the value creation business. So,
Right.
like, how are we going to create value for our clients? We do that through marketing and using marketing as an unfair advantage. It could be, a digital experience. It could be, a sponsorship deal. But at the end of the day, we have to create value and we have to
Right.
kind of show that. And I think that's where agencies miss the mark of just providing the services, but not connecting it back to the business.
So so you talked a little bit about the people and so forth. Does that mean that the types of players you need on your team now, as you've scaled, are different in terms of and you use the word mindset a lot. I'm curious if now you're hiring different mindsets of players as well on your team.
Mhm. Yes. And I would say an example of that is our media division scale. So we started offering media services only 5 years ago. So it's a relatively new unit and billing over $75 million this year. So, that is a very quick growth curve on what we've
Mhm.
kind of and what we've been through from that. And we were named Adweek's Breakthrough Media Agency of the Year this year, which is a
Congratulations again. I love it.
thank you. Yes. But I think this is a great example of how what we chose our offering to be, and I'm not going to get in the weeds of like, that's because it's more marketing speak of that. But in a large standpoint, it's seeing where there was an opportunity and truly staffing it differently with more hybridish types of senior talent that can execute, that can plan, that can sell, and which is what you need in an emerging division. You need people that can do multiple things, um, and that served us well. Now we're at the point, truthfully, with scale right now that we are moving from the generalists to the specialists.
Right.
We're getting more sophisticated clients. We're getting more specific requests. Reporting, analytics, technology is also multiplying. A lot of people at Doomsday are saying that like media planners are going to be gone in 5 years just through AI technology. So we're at that next challenge of evolution for scale on talent, technology, how to approach it. But again, I view this as like, what a great problem to have. You know, the business is evolving, the business is growing. It's time for its next evolution to set up for continued success.
It's interesting. I think that you said that the how is changing, and I think the right way of framing it, meaning that the need and the outcome isn't changing. The client still want and still needs the analytics and all the services you're providing, but the how they get there may change, and how you deliver it may change as well. You also said that the way that you're building teams has evolved, and it's funny. I kind of reckon that back to even your sports analogies early on. You kind of came out of the serving sports industry early on.
Hmm.
Sports teams are structured differently at different times as well, right? Depending on the
Yeah.
evolution of the team structure as well. And I wonder if you've thought about that as an analogy about, like, are you thinking about the different evolutions, or what you're competing for at a time, and the personalities that you put on the bench to work together, if that makes sense.
Oh, totally. Totally. My analogy that I always give for startups or things that are just starting, it's like 5-year-old swarm ball soccer, right? Like
That's a good one. Yeah, I like it.
everyone's just trying to they're just all doing this. Everyone's figuring it out, right? And I think that's you can see as you go from 5-year-old soccer to high school, and the stages of what you kind of know. People understand positions, they understand spacing, passing, just understanding the game and the strategy of the game. So that's where I always kind of view that, and reminding people, when we're in a certain phase, it's like it's okay. Like we're in swarm ball soccer here. Like we're figuring it out, but with the goal kind of moving into the next thing. But it is true that transition from generals to specialist, like we've seen it on all sides of our business, from creative media to production. And I think it also represents too the dynamic between Chris and I, shifting roles. Like Chris was really more of an appropriate startup CEO, hands in everything, wanting to be involved, could pivot very quickly. But as you know, that's not very scalable.
Right.
If you want to scale, then you actually have to have a strategy of expertise and also different kind of ways of working. Um, so yeah.
That's an interesting role, because then it goes from the superstar approach of being involved in everything to then playing it is kind of like you said earlier, playing the mature role of moving from the bunch ball to the awkward teenager stage, to, and at
Yep.
the high school, and then moving the up a league and so forth. Uh, do you see yourself now as a coach or a player, a combination of all the above? How has your role evolved most recently?
I view myself as a coach for sure. I think the worst thing that founders can do for a business is to be too intimately involved in certain capacities that couldn't survive without them. And the whole idea for a scalable business is it needs to be able to you have to be there, but you don't have to be in every single thing in order
Totally.
for it to continue to function at that. You're training the next level. You're training the team. You're training the team to do the things that you have just done, and they're training the things that they just done. So it really is more about that, how I kind of view it, because as to our how we started off this conversation, the pace of change is so quickly.
Yeah.
Who's looking for that? Like you have to have time and space to see what is happening a year, 2, 3 around the bend, so you can adjust business accordingly in order to stay relevant, from that standpoint.
Y- It's you said how do you stay relevant going forward, and I think you're right. Meaning, a lot of our prior guests have talked about the pace of change being faster than ever, AI driving a pace of change in that. That's clearly changing the world that the marketing's in, as well. But maybe I'd like, as we kind of get closer to the end of the conversation here, you've spent a lot of time thinking about, and when you've been rewarded for and being noted as the largest women-owned business in Los Angeles, in your space. And I believe I like the word you used. You like to be a coach, and you're also helping coach the next generation of women leaders and entrepreneurs and so forth. What does that mean to you?
I love working with women business owners. I just think, half of the businesses in the US are owned by women.
Right.
45% of all businesses are owned by women, but yet they occupy like less than 10% of payroll. So you're seeing that gap in actual impact that it's making from a marketplace and how they get there is scale. And so that the scaling realities of starting versus scaling is something that, I think is the next evolution, which I'm really involved in. I started an initiative specific to the advertising industry called Own It, which was really at first set out to get an accurate count of women-owned agencies in the industry because no one had that data. So we set out to find it. Shocker, it's horribly dismal. Less than 1% of all agencies are owned by women. But with Own It, what we started to do is create a community. My co-founder hosts a podcast to give visibility. I mean, really, it's like, so it's taking this community of 700 owners, amplifying them, giving them resources to each other, because that is how we're going to continue to get to scale and get agencies that can become like Zambezi, where they can have global clients and really kind of continue to elevate in the industry, because truthfully we deserve, I think it's well deserved. And we've been really happy to see women been continuing to take the plunge coming out of COVID and saying, you know what, I'm going to try it. And so Owen being a community and an embodiment of that is exciting to see.
Well, if you don't measure it, it's not going to happen, right? And,
Right.
and I think that's really important. You said, like, if nobody has the metrics, who's going to pay attention to it, and how
Right.
you're going to invest in it? What are you going to do about it? What's the next step, right? And I think it's an interesting piece where you're able to then leverage all the learnings that we've talked about in the last few minutes and help others and play that coach role in a different
Hmm.
chapter as well. It's pretty cool. Pretty cool.
Yeah. Sometimes they don't like my advice, but I give it to them anyways.
Well, just because you have advice doesn't mean everybody's going to listen, and that's
Mm.
okay. But
Yeah.
putting it
Fine.
out there in the world, and there are lessons learned that all of us have, right? That we
Right.
can pick up. So I'd like to kind of close with a kind of a rapid fire section. We call it leadership in 60 seconds. It doesn't have to be 60 seconds, but this is the section where we'll see if people listen or not, right? And follow up on some of our conversation. You kind of touched on this one earlier. What's the one thing you wish you knew earlier in your career?
Yeah, I mentioned about having access to coaching and giving my team coaching for that. And I think the other thing that's really hard when you're first entrepreneur, I also like related to like when you're a first parent, like when you're first like become a parent for the first time, is like you're listening to everyone's advice and you're
Yeah.
trying to take everyone's advice. Although if listen to me, I just said they're not listening to my advice earlier. But I think that's the hardest thing is figuring out who do I listen to, who do I not listen to? Because if you listen to everybody, it can become really complicated in order to get a very linear plan to move forward.
That's a good one. So be, kind of create focus in that jumble of advice out there, right? And pick and
Uh-huh.
choose who you're going to listen to. All right, that goes back to the coaching point too, as well. I like it. The next one? What's the one trait that every leader must have?
Yeah, I like to say your greatest strength is also your greatest weakness. So
Greatest
really
strength is
knowing
always your
that.
greatest. Yeah. That, that's good as well. Is understanding, how your strength can actually blind you as well, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
I like it. All right, here's another one. What's one mistake or maybe an easy mistake that leaders often make?
Focus on revenue, not expenses.
Revenue, not expenses. I didn't expect that from Eugene. That's
Mm.
an interesting one. I like for the advertising and marketing person to dig into the operational details right off the bat. I love it. All right.
Oh, that's me. That's me. I love those operational details. That's how you build a sustainable business,
If
by
if
having that operational diligence.
if you don't know the details, it's not going to happen. All right. It
Yep.
goes back to your reporting one. That's a good trend. Who inspires you most today?
You know, I I have two teenagers, and the opportunities that they have in front of them, I think, are tremendous. I know Gen Alpha and Gen Z kind of gets a bad rap, but I think I was Gen X and I got a bad rap too when I was first entering into the workforce. Um, they have tremendous potential and see the world very differently than I did coming in, and I think that's going to be a great asset for this next generation coming to the workforce.
We share that. You and I are both Gen X, and I also have two teenagers. You know that, and um, I do see a lot of hope and pretty amazing future. And if any of their friends, can carry out the things that are in their heads, that's pretty incredible stuff. All right, last one. Do you have any favorite leadership books or podcasts that you'd like to recommend, other than this one, of course?
Of course, other than this one, podcasts, I go through different. I almost feel like I consume so much marketing media throughout the day. My podcasts usually tend to be more relaxed, from that standpoint, or more like culture of things that are kind of happening from that aspect. Um, but I would say, from if you're an entrepreneur and you're thinking about starting a business, the book that I always give to people is called Scaling Up. And it basically kind of outlines how, it's a little bit kind of taking, like, not just starting, but kind of growing, and like the components that are kind of necessary to that.
That's a good one. We'll put a link out to that one as well in the show notes. Jean, I really appreciate our conversation. This has been fun and intriguing, and we covered a lot in a short amount of time. I hope you had some fun as well. Thank you for joining me today as we wrap this up. And I can't wait to see what the next chapter brings for Zambezi and so forth. Thank you again for joining us.
Great. Thanks, Ryan. It was fun.